anytime you feel that anxiousness or the constraint or the time, and it makes you want to rush a decision or rush to a point, bust this draw, take off running through the woods, stop, breathe, think about what the options are, identify what you were taught and what you have practiced implementing in this particular situation, and then stick to the principles, because I promise you the principles that you learn in land navigation are going to be the fastest way to find your point. Just running through the woods without a plan will not be. Welcome to the Infinite Grip Podcast. This is the show for those preparing to earn their place in special operations and other elite tactical careers. We break down the training, mindset, and strategies required to get selected and continue performing long-term. These are proven principles to help you build the body, the mind, and resilience to step into the fight. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Infinite Podcast, and today we are talking about the 5 most common mistakes that those who are new to land navigation often make. And this is fresh in my mind because this past weekend we ran our very first 24-hour land navigation event where we took 10 of our members out to the Pine Country in northern Arizona, and we taught them everything from how to read a map, plot a point on the map, shoot an azimuth, plan a route, dead reckon, pace count, etc. And we had them, we started out with some classroom portion and then went into some practical exercises where they actually navigated around the woods, and then ended with a culminating exercise where we had some communication constraints and had them working as a team. Overall, it was a fantastic trip, a lot of fun, really cool to meet you guys in person. For those that were out there and are listening today, awesome to meet you guys. You guys absolutely crushed it. We threw a lot of information at you, so it was kind of like drinking through a fire hose and tried to squeeze in as much as we could in those 24 hours. But had a camp set up. We cooked burgers that first night, woke up in the morning, had some pancakes and bacon, and then had a good time, and we're going out there land navigating. So and this is something that we are going to continuously run in the future. We're working on the logistics of it. We're working on getting a property in the area, so everything will be set up from lodging to food to mentorship events, obviously the land navigation, utilizing the public land, and getting some really good training value out of it. So our goal is, guys, just get up there, we take care of everything else, and we either run a 24 or 48-hour event, going over all of those things and spending some time in the field. But throughout this, we broke into teams, and myself, I was with one team, and then CJ, our other Green Beret coach, was with another team. And there were 5 kind of recurring or common mistakes that I really noticed guys were making. And thinking back to when I was first starting land navigation, a lot of these mistakes I made. So I'm not beating up on anybody. You guys did a fantastic job, but this is so we can continue to learn, refine our skill set, and put ourselves in the best possible position to succeed down the road. But number one mistake that is super common among those who are new to land navigation is not trusting their compass. And it sounds funny to say because we can sit in an office and say, oh, I trust the compass. No matter what happens, I trust the compass. But when you get out into the field and maybe you're in an area that you thought looked different on the map, or you just had this mental model of what it was supposed to look like, and that gets turned around, or it's not met, or you have anxiety start creeping up, you get a little bit turned around, it's really easy to look at your compass and say, hey, I'm going at a 270-degree azimuth, but this just does not seem right. I think I need to actually head over there. And a lot of times guys will trust their gut feeling, which isn't usually grounded in reality yet because they haven't built up that terrain association skill set. So it can be very flawed to not trust your compass. And there were many times where I was in situations like this myself. So it's super common. And you guys have probably heard, those who are training for Special Forces Assessment and Selection have probably heard about Bones Fork Creek, or the draws out at selection, the draw monsters. These draws out at selection are absolutely nasty, and we want to try to avoid them with our route planning as much as possible, but there is going to be a time in your selection experience when you have to bust a draw, when you have to go through these draws. And I remember maybe it was a north-south running draw, and I was shooting a straight east azimuth trying to bust through this draw, and it looks like it's 100 meters on the map, but ends up being a 400 meter thick draw where you're just covered in briars. You have the stickers pulling on you, cutting your skin as you're walking through it, and you're just having a hell of a time getting turned around. I talked about it this weekend, but there were literally times where it was so thick that I just turned around, and instead of trying to walk through it, I jumped and just ruck flopped my way through the draw. So there are times where it gets very, very thick. And when you get inside of these environments and your anxiety starts increasing and you're turning around, you don't really have a frame of reference of what direction you're heading in anymore. You can pull out your compass and feel like it's not correct because you thought you were heading in a different direction. And maybe you walk for longer than you expected to inside of this draw, and you think there's no way that this compass is correct, and you start kind of making your own route. And that is how you get into trouble. That is how you start walking linearly with the draw instead of walking perpendicularly and getting through it. So absolutely 100% of the time, trust your compass. If you are worried that your compass is broken, or maybe you fell on it and it's acting weird, it's starting to stick, whatever, bring a backup compass inside of your ruck. Verify both the compasses. If they point in the same direction, I promise you that is the direction that you need to head. Your compass is never wrong. We had a team out at Land Navigation. We had one team the entire time get lost, and we picked a spot that had overview and had good cell service, so we had a comms plan and kind of a safety net or a safety plan in place. And I got a call while he was out there, and he's like, "Hey, can you send me the pin to the campsite?" And he got back to camp, and we talked about it, and that's exactly what it was. Is he finished? He got his first 2 points super quick, and they were going back to the start point, and he felt like it didn't look right. He felt like he needed to be over there and that the compass was not correct. He simply did not trust his compass, and he ended up on the main road at the border of the Land Navigation site. And it's kind of funny because during the route planning class, I talked about the common mistake that a lot of guys make at selection, and that is when they give you your grid, you sit down and you start planning and plotting your points, and sometimes almost immediately guys will just get up and start running off into the woods. And when guys start leaving and you're still there planning your route and there's a time constraint, you start feeling a lot of stress and you feel like you're behind or you're moving too slow. So you start rushing and getting out there and going to find your point. And it's funny because this is the only team that got lost, and we kept making the joke that they were the first ones to leave the site every time when we gave guys grids, and they were done planning the routes. But their planning was solid. We talked through it and looked over it, but it did jinx them a little bit, and they ended up being the only ones to get lost. So number one is trust your pace count. Number two is take the time and ensure that your azimuth is correct. And if you know your azimuth is correct, trust your compass. If you know your azimuth is correct and you trust your compass, then I promise you're going to be heading in the right direction. You just have to trust that you're making the right decisions out there. Number two, most common mistake is not keeping your pace count. And this was with one of our practical exercises. So we teach in the route planning portion of the course, we teach utilizing checkpoints. We want to use roads. We want to use identifiable features. We want to use whatever we can find that is between us and our endpoint as checkpoints. So instead of navigating 5, 6, 7 kilometers from your start point to your endpoint, you might be navigating 800 to 1,000 meters at a time from one checkpoint to the next. And this team, this was during the practical exercise, they ended up finding their point, and they crushed it, did a great job. But they had a route plan to move on the south side of the road and utilize a road or an intersection as their initial checkpoint. Well, we touched on it. And essentially, there was no limit of advance that was funneling them into their checkpoint. And I could do a whole class on this kind of top-down map thing. If you guys want to see that, just comment down below and I can do that. But they didn't have a limit of advance. They didn't have something clearly funneling them into their checkpoint. So I would have personally done a different checkpoint. But what it led to is them coming up to the road and checking and seeing if their intersection was there. and they eventually lost their pace count. And while I was following them, kind of noting what they were doing and providing feedback, I knew we only moved 500 meters, 600 meters. But for them, because they were going up to the road and coming back, because they lost their pace count, they didn't have a good frame of reference as to how far they went. So even though their road or what they were looking for was 900 meters away, we had only gone 500 meters because they lost their pace count and they were kind of bouncing around and not walking in relatively straight line. They thought that they went a lot further than they did. So they thought they were across the road. They just started getting lost, started heading south, following a draw, doing all this stuff, making, one poor decision led to many other poor decisions. And that's how you end up teleporting or just getting lost out in the woods. So not keeping your pace count is a huge mistake, because that is one of pace count and terrain association. Those are your only frames of reference for how far you have traveled, and they're not going to be perfect. You might be 100 meters short, 200 meters short, 200 meters long, etc. But you have to have some sort of frame of reference. Otherwise, you start thinking that you're way too short, you didn't travel far enough, or you're way too long, and you think you went a lot further than you did, and it starts getting you in trouble. And then those decisions lead to other poor decisions that shouldn't even been an option throughout that movement from checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 2, and now they are screwing up your entire route. So always trust your compass, always keep your pace count, and follow the plan. That's why when we talk about route planning, we want to write everything out. We know exactly where we're going, what we're doing from checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 2, from checkpoint 2 to checkpoint 3, etc. We have it all planned out. And number 3 is picking poor route plans. This comes with experience. The more experience you have walking around the woods, seeing what the contour lines and the elevation gain and loss on the map looks like in person, and what those terrain features actually represent when you get to them, when you develop that terrain association or that understanding, you become more efficient at picking more efficient route plans, picking ground that you can walk through relatively quickly, picking corridors where you know that no matter what happens, maybe I have a road off to my east or off to my north, I am in a corridor, and as long as I don't cross a road until my checkpoint, I know I'm somewhere in this particular area. Those types of route plans come with experience. But one of the biggest kind of mistakes that I saw guys making is not establishing very good corridors or checkpoints. And going back to this particular practical exercise, on the north side of the road, there was a east-west running road with an intersection and a northwest running road at that intersection point. And then on the south side of the road, there was that east-west running road to the north, and then further west, about 1,000 meters, was another north-south running road. Well, their route plan was to go to the south side of the road, but use the intersection on the north side as a checkpoint. And that created an issue because they had to essentially be inside of the road to try to find that checkpoint, instead of being on the north where you just walk to a north-south running road, handrail it down to your intersection if you want to use that, and you know exactly where you're at. So pick a route that kind of removes the additional work out of it. You know that there's a north-south running road west about 1,000 meters. You just walk west 1,000 meters until you hit your road. You know exactly where you're at. You shouldn't have a route plan where you have to continually go up to the road and see where you're at on it, or see if you've passed your intersection, or your intersection is still coming up, because it's very, very hard to pinpoint that, especially in a selection environment where you have to be ideally 100 meters off the road so you don't get road killed. You don't want to be able to see the road, because if you can see the road, you're probably too close to it and you're running the risk of becoming roadkill. So if you can't see the road and you don't have a clear backstop or limit of advance inside of your route plan, it becomes very hard to find the intersection or find what you're going to use as your limit of advance or your your checkpoint. So picking good route plans is a huge common mistake that guys make. And to do this, you have to have the experience, but you have to think logically, and you have to just keep it simple. The more you have complicated route plans and use features that aren't clearly identifiable or don't have corridors set up, don't have a backstop or a limit of advance, don't have a linear feature kind of keeping you in this general area, the harder it is to actually adhere to your route plan. So keep it simple. Spend the time in the beginning looking at all the obstacles, all the navigable terrain, finding which route is going to be efficient and which one is going to be, providing the most, reassurance or feedback on the ground in the form of checkpoints or landmarks that you can identify exactly where you're at. And then mistake number 4 is needing to use roads as a safety net too much. And you see this, I did this when I first started navigating. I talked recently on a podcast about when I first started getting out into the woods on my own. I would get 100 meters off the road and I would feel very nervous. That comes with the comfortability in these types of environments. That comes with spending more time in the outdoors. But what happens a lot of times is new navigators will use a road to handrail as a corridor or as, their eastern boundary or northern boundary, whatever it is, which is good. I encourage that. But they want to stay too close to it because if they see the road, they have that safety blanket. We don't necessarily need to see the road to handrail a road. We just want something to keep us, if we start drifting left or drifting south, we can just shoot an azimuth up to that road and know relatively where we're at. If we can see the road, like I said, we're going to be too close to it. So we don't need to rely on it to the point where we start drifting into it. We have to see it the entire time. That's going to create a lot of issues. It's going to create very slow movement, and it's going to create, probably more anxiety than it's going to help solve. So trust where you're at. Trust that road is there, that you can always go touch it if you need a reset, do some modified resection, utilizing a point off that road, something like that but you do not have to see it the entire time to efficiently, handrail that particular road. And then number 5 is abandoning principles when there's a time constraint. This happens all the time, and it's one of the biggest reasons why guys fail to route plan in the beginning. They fail to clearly list everything out. They fail to clearly, write out their azimuths or convert their azimuth from grid north to magnetic north, or not write out which feature they're going to or the distance that they're going to be traveling, etc. But it also leads guys to making poor decisions out in the field. And in the situation that we place these guys in, we had a time constraint. It was basically a scenario where they had to get to an extraction point. And the entire movement, they crushed it. They did exactly what they were taught. They went across the road. They got into this corridor. They traveled north until they hit their backstop. They handrailed it to their attack point. And we had a time constraint, so I kept calling out times to add that pressure. 10 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 minutes, 5 minutes. And at 6 minutes or something like that, they were 180 meters away from their point, and they were at their attack point. So all they had to do is walk out into the intersection, shoot their azimuth, and then dead reckon 180 meters, which should take just a couple minutes, and they would have been at their extraction point right on time. Instead, what they did is, because they had that 5 minutes, they went north of the road, which kind of negated their plan. They never walked out of the intersection. They never even shot an actual clear azimuth, and they kind of just took off running into the woods, running east, when their point was a little bit northeast. So they started running. They hit the time. They busted time, so we had to reset them and walk them up to the point and do an AAR. But had they slowed down, had they spent the 30 seconds it would have to shoot that azimuth and to dead reckon to that point, they would have seen their point with plenty of time to spare. But because they had that time constraint and the stress of a time or a hit time, they abandoned the principles, and instead of focusing on moving smoothly and moving slow to go smooth, they just took off running thinking that was the fastest way. And that is super common. I've made that mistake And when you guys go to selection, you will feel the pressure of the time constraint. They're going to give you your point. They're going to say 10 hours starts now. And even though 10 hours is a shit ton of time to go find your points in the woods, we feel the pressure of it. When we see guys leaving the land nav site with their routes planned and taking off running, we start feeling that pressure more and more, and it leads to us abandoning the principles. So anytime you feel that anxiousness or the constraint or the time, and it makes you want to rush a decision or rush to a point, bust this draw, take off running through the woods, stop, breathe, think about what the options are, identify what you were taught and what you have practiced implementing in this particular situation, and then stick to the principles, because I promise you the principles that you learn in land navigation are going to be the fastest way to find your point. Just running through the woods without a plan will not be. And a lot of times, we teach, establishing a corridor, going to a limit of advance or a backstop, funneling into an attack point, utilizing terrain association primarily during that time so you can move relatively quickly. And then when you get to your attack point, you slow down and you have a very deliberate movement, ideally within that 500 meters from the endpoint. We teach that, and when guys will dead reckon that last portion, sometimes you get off. Maybe you didn't convert your azimuth, whatever. And what often happens with guys who fail the star course is they go from their attack point, they go into this area, they start searching it. It didn't turn, they couldn't find their point, and then they just start wandering this area. And they spend hours searching for their point. Instead of, that point maybe only 300 meters away from the attack point. That's like a 3-minute walk maybe, right? So instead of wandering this particular area, they could have taken the 5 minutes to go back to their attack point, verify their azimuth, verify their direction, reshoot it, re-dead reckon, and have a very high or a much higher likelihood of finding their point versus just, searching in that particular area. And another, common mistake, this is, I guess, mistake number 6 in this dead reckoning portion, is when they get to that area, maybe they were, 80 meters off of their point, and they start wandering without some sort of pattern. Instead, we want to have some way or structured method to grid or search the area. A good way to do this is find an identifiable feature, whether it's a massive tree, a burnt out tree that you'll often see in North Carolina, something that you can identify, and then you walk circles around that identifiable point, getting your circle bigger and bigger, still able to see it. And if you don't find it, you reset at the attack point. So abandoning principles when there's a time constraint is mistake number 5, and that is often what leads to the biggest things. And I would say abandoning principles when you feel the pressure of getting lost as well. Whenever we get lost, we start feeling like we just want to get out of that situation. It's human nature to feel and rush to a conclusion that gets you out of danger. And that happens when we're walking in the woods and the terrain or our mental model shifts, and it just looks like something completely different than what we expected. And that gut feeling sets in and we say, oh shit, I'm lost. And that is often when our mind starts saying, we need to get on lost now, and you need to run and you need to move quickly. But instead, the opposite is what is going to get you unstuck. Thinking, breathing, replanning, figuring out what the next steps are, shooting an oh shit azimuth to your linear terrain feature like your road or whatever you're handrailing, going back to your previous checkpoint. Those are all better options than just abandoning the principles and running through the woods, because that is how you end up somewhere where you have no idea how you possibly got there. So to wrap it up, the 5 common mistakes is not trusting your compass, not keeping a pace count, picking poor route plans, needing to use roads as a safety net, and then abandoning the principles when there's a time constraint or you get lost. And then number 6 was not having a structured pattern when you start looking for your point, and instead just kind of wandering through the area, hoping that you stumble upon it. So next time you guys go out and land navigate, keep those things in mind. If you guys end up coming to one of our future courses, keep those things in mind and be able to and we will teach the principles on how to counter those and obviously find your point in and through stressful situations. So got a couple questions From the community this week, question number 1 is, do you go through any mental ritual before a timed event or PT test? And like most people, I have a lot of performance anxiety. I get performance anxiety before I record this podcast talking to a camera in my office on my own. There's always things that make us nervous or make us anxious, and a lot of times a PT test is one of those things. It's time to go show all of the work we've put in, where there's going to be someone grading us and looking at our numbers. It's natural to feel that performance anxiety creeping in. But the way I always did it, and the things that I always implement now, is all of the work is done up to that point. If it is 24 hours before a PT test, aside from eating quality food, getting sleep, drinking plenty of water, and supplementing with electrolytes if needed, depending on the PT test, there's not anything else you can do to increase your odds of success. That is all a depiction of the work that you have put in over the last previous month. So if you've been squared away with training on a consistent basis, then you should be going into that PT test. You're probably still going to feel a little nervous, but you should be going in that PT test knowing that there is nothing else you can do, that you did everything you possibly can to put yourself in a position to succeed. So what is the point of worrying about all of the potential negative outcomes or what will happen if you get a particular score on the PT test? It's not that big of a deal. And like I said, it's the work is done. Now it's just time to go out there and perform. And the more we psych ourselves up about it, and the more we pull on those threads of those negative thought processes, the more we go down the rabbit holes of what's going to happen if we don't get a particular score, or we get to 42 push-ups and we just freaking, burn out and we can't get any more. Like the more likely it happens. The more thought we put into the potential for failure, the more likely it becomes. So instead of dwelling on the potential for a negative outcome, understand that there's nothing else you could have done to prepare yourself any better at this point. And all you're going to do is go out there and action it, put in your best effort, and the rest will take care of itself. The actual things that you can do is breathing. I'm going to talk about breathing here in a second, but I recently read the book Breathe by James Nestor, I think his name is. Fantastic book, a lot of really good principles in it, and there's a lot of principles that we can apply to physical performance and mental performance as well. One of those is box breathing. You guys have probably heard this before, but it's where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and then hold that for 4 seconds. You do that for 5 to 10 rounds or 5 minutes. And when you start feeling that anxiety creep up, you can use this for a PT test. You can use this when you're nervous about going to selection, when you're having a lot of performance anxiety about something. Focus on your breath. Run through this a couple times, and it grounds you and it calms your nervous system physiologically speaking, and it puts you in a position to focus on what is around you instead of focusing on everything that lies ahead of you and again pulling on those negative or those threads of those negative thought processes. Next question is, what can I do for stress management in a toxic work environment? And this is very common, especially in the military. In the military, you are going to have to work with leaders who you don't get along with. Maybe it's a toxic environment. Maybe they're abusing their power. Maybe they just don't know how to lead and they're creating a miserable environment for their individuals. I was in some of those miserable environments and had toxic leaders and all of that stuff. And the thing that worked for me and what one of my friends essentially told me to do is turn it into a game. If you were in the military, if you're in a situation, if you're planning on going to special forces in 6 months and you're going to go to selection, then obviously the situation that you are in is very temporary. So understand that it is very temporary, and we can kind of play that game without allowing those stressors to have a big effect on our mindset, on our thought process, on our performance outside of that environment. And the more we play the game, the more we develop that resilience to put up with these types of things later down the road. Because I have a freaking surprise for you guys. Like, there's still toxic work environments inside of special forces. Special forces, there's been many videos put out about it recently talking about how special forces is turning into an admin position, and it's a lot of officers trying to get OER bullets or officer evaluation report bullets because they did something special. And in my experience, towards the end of my career after Afghanistan ended, it became very political. There's a lot of toxic shit that goes on within special forces. There's a lot of gossip between Green Berets. There still is. It's just like it's a weird kind of cutthroat community. And you will have to deal with this stress inside of these environments. So the better that you are able to handle it right now, the better you're going to be able to handle it down the road. And those big problems are not going to feel like big problems when you've handled them and exposed yourself to it for a long period of time. So focus on what you can control, turn it into a game if you have to, and understand that it is a temporary environment that you are placed in. If it's a job where you're on the civilian side and it's a career that you have worked for a period of time and you're planning on staying in that career, there are other ways to handle it. Maybe you apply for different companies within that same career field or look for other opportunities. You're not stuck. We can feel like we're stuck because you have a paycheck coming in and obviously you have overhead of personal expenses, but there are so many opportunities around in us at all times. And if we have an abundant mindset and we understand that there are plenty of opportunities, we just need to learn how to look for them and learn how to exploit them and pursue them. Then we can get out of this mindset of feeling stuck. And believe me, I've felt that before. And now I've changed my mindset and go from more of a fixed mindset and everything is so constricted or so limited to there's limitless opportunities out there. So if you feel stuck, understand that you can do something about it. There are plenty of things that you can do to change your situation if it is this bad and is causing a huge detriment inside of your mindset, inside of your personal life, inside of your performance, etc. So it is 100% within your power to change. All right, next question. How will I know when I'm ready, or will I ever know? For selection. So he's asking, how will I know when I'm ready for selection? From a physical standpoint, we can obviously look at your numbers. And I'm never going to bullshit somebody. If someone's running a 15:30 or a 16-minute 2 mile, I'm not going to say, you're ready for selection, go send it. No. We have a 100% pass rate of gate week because if guys aren't ready, I tell them to push back their selection date because you're going to struggle during gate week. Why would I send somebody that I know is not physically capable of going? So on a physical standpoint, we can strive for and hit the numbers that we have discussed multiple times on this podcast to know that we are ready. Once we hit those numbers, understand that you are physically ready. And from a mental standpoint, you are likely never going to feel ready to go to Special Forces assessment and selection. When I went to selection, I had worked my ass off. I worked for years. I joined the Army at 18, went to selection at 22. And for those 4 years, selection was my goal. I trained for selection. I far exceeded the physical standards that I knew I was going to have to perform in at selection. And when I showed up to selection, I still felt like I was not ready. And it is common. You have to put yourself in these uncomfortable situations. You're going to a place where you're going to be assessed. Cadre, or you're going to have to go out and do challenging events, and they're going to grade your performance and see how you perform in stressful environments and under all of these circumstances. And you're going to be taking psych evals. Like, it's a big psychological stressor to know that you're being assessed with everything that you do. But the biggest thing I would say with this is it is not your job to assess. Leave that to the cadre. Your job is to show up, be on time to the event with the uniform that they tell you and all of the gear that they have listed out, and then put out 100% with each event. If you do that day over day for the 3 or 4 weeks that selection is right now, then the odds of you being successful goes up tremendously, rather than worrying about every little thing that the cadre thinks about you and every little thing that you did and critiquing yourself. Like, that is just going to drive you crazy. So no, you will never just go to selection and feel this overwhelming sense of confidence and you are going to crush it and you are completely ready, because the truth is nobody's truly ready for that environment. It's going to be probably something, or probably the hardest thing you have done up to that point in your life physically. especially when you guys get to team week. So you just have to go out there and commit to doing whatever it takes and commit to putting 100% effort into every single event that is placed in front of you. Fourth question, how should I approach my recruiter regarding going 18X? This is a fantastic question. And while we were out at the land navigation event, obviously that night we had kind of a mentorship thing. We sat around in a circle, bullshitting, asking questions, answering questions, talking about our careers, stories, etc. And one of the questions that came up while we were out at the land navigation event was, we had an individual who wants to go 18X or option 40. And the recruiter he was going to told him that none of those are available and he has to just take another job to get into the Army and then he can drop a packet to go down the road. That is super common with what we're seeing amongst recruiters right now, and it's a pretty shitty thing to do. And there's nothing wrong with getting a new recruiter if they're just constantly pushing you into something that you do not want to do. Kind of like what we talked about in the last podcast. The only wrong answer when you join the Army is joining a job that you don't genuinely want to do. And this is how it works on the recruiter side. There are jobs that are available at certain times and they come out. I don't know how often they come out, but let's say they come out in a list every week and they say, hey, these jobs are the MOSs that are open this week or this month. Well, if they get taken or if they're not available at the time, the recruiter might honestly be able to say 18 X-ray or option 40 is not available. You have to, if you want to join the Army, you have to take another job. But that's only true for like 2 weeks or until the next month. Like the jobs cycle through and availability changes. So I would say the biggest thing when you are going to talk to a recruiter is this is the only time in your entire military career where you have 100% control over your career. So instead of going into this kind of with a soft attitude and thinking that or getting talked into something that you don't genuinely want to do, or getting influenced by the recruiter to go a certain way because he manipulated you by saying that this particular job was not currently available or was not ever going to be available again. Go in there with the thought, like always be respectful, but go in there with the mindset that this recruiter is working for me. He is facilitating me joining the military. I'm doing the military a service by joining. They need recruits. I am volunteering years of my life, which is not a small commitment, to go join the military. Like that is like you have full control. So you have the power when you're going to talk to a recruiter. Do not let them talk you into something. If they say something is not available, say, hey, cool. Call me when it is. Call me when these 3 MOSs are available and I'll come in and talk. We can knock out all of the paperwork that I need to get the ball rolling, but these are the jobs that I want. I'm not going to take anything else because I know exactly what I want. I've done my freaking due diligence. So call me when it's available. Don't let them talk you into something. All right. And then last question, how do I keep up speed on long runs? So speed, like keeping up your speed comes with the conditioning. Obviously, right? We can talk about breathing in just a second, but the keeping up those faster paces on those longer runs comes from driving up our lactate threshold, comes from increasing our body's efficiency at producing energy, at utilizing oxygen, at all of these things at those higher intensities. So we have to get consistent exposure to that. Obviously, still accounting for fatigue. Don't go out there and start running freaking 2 miles every day or doing the speed sessions every day. That's not what I'm saying. But we want to drive up that performance over time. And with that, you will see your ability to keep up speed on those longer runs continue to improve. Now, from a zone 2 standpoint, this is a question we get all the time. Hey, I run a 13-minute 2 mile, but my zone 2 pace is like 12 minutes. Does that mean I'm out of shape? What does that mean? And no, it doesn't. It's actually super common, especially for individuals coming from a sports background. It happened to me. I played freaking baseball, basketball, and football growing up, where I never ran more than 100 meters and never ran at a low intensity. It was always very high intensity, very short distances. So when I started doing endurance work and when I first discovered zone 2, my zone 2 pace was like 14 minutes. It was absolute trash, but I was fit. I had freaking abs. I could run. Like I felt like that was pretty terrible. Like, what is going on? And if you guys have ever read the Uphill Athlete, what is it called? training for the uphill athlete, they have a book talking about endurance training, essentially. Go over in depth on zone 2, and something he mentions in the book is called ADS, aerobic deficiency syndrome. Syndrome is a pretty poor word choice in here because it implies that there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you, but all it's talking about is an underdeveloped aerobic energy system. So our body is so used to performing at these high intensities, these short effort, high intensity work that is very glycolytic, meaning our body is pulling energy from glycogen or utilizing our anaerobic energy system, and we get very, very little exposure to the aerobic or the lower intensity, longer duration work. So when we start doing that, our body wants to jump into that anaerobic zone or start pulling from glycogen because it's so efficient. The only way to get out of that is just spend more time in zone 2. Be patient with it. Don't worry about your pacing with it, and trust that when you're in the right heart rate zone, or keeping it relatively easy, able to nasal breathe, etc., that your body is getting the stimulus and getting the exposure and going to increase the strength and the efficiency of that aerobic system. And that is how you slowly drive down those paces. But when training for the military, I could give two shits about your zone 2 pace. It is not a good depiction of your overall performance. We just use zone 2 as a way to build up that aerobic capacity, which gives us a lot more access to energy stores that we wouldn't otherwise be able to efficiently use if we just did high intensity work. And it gives our body the ability to get those miles in, increase the conditioning without creating so much fatigue from the sessions that it undermines the higher intensity work or undermines us driving down those run times, because now we live in an under recovered state. So understand that zone 2 and that slower long work is just supplemental to drive up our performance in the things that are really going to matter. So if my zone 2 pace is 12, 13 minutes, I could really give two shits. It will improve over time, and I trust that, but I just know that it's supplemental and it's going to help my performance overall. Also, with the keeping speed up on long runs, you want to make sure that you are working on some type of breathing rhythm. Kind of like what I talked about in the book, Breathe, there are ways in our body physiologically changes and becomes more adapted to utilizing the oxygen better or balancing the CO2, which is an interesting thing that he talks about inside of the book. And having a breathing rhythm is one of the best ways to do that. When we, have a 3-2 rhythm or a 3-3, 4-2, whatever it is that we are implementing, and we have a rhythm with our pacing, it enables us to increase that and still maintain it. So this week you can go try a 3-2 rhythm. Every 3 steps, or you breathe in for 3 steps, you breathe out for 2 steps. Try it on a zone 2 run, focusing on nasal breathing only, as much as you possibly can, and develop a breathing rhythm matched with your steps. And as you continue to increase your pacing, you just increase the speed at which you go through that rhythm, and it can really help your breathing not feel like it's all over the place and help you sustain those longer speeds or those higher speeds on those longer runs. But I'll stop rambling about running, but appreciate you guys watching. Shout out to Alpar. Alpar was at our event this weekend. Told me, he listened to all the podcasts. So really freaking cool to meet the guys on the other side of the camera. And, shout out to you, brother. You got great, you're super cool guy, and obviously have a very bright future. So I appreciate your continued support. I appreciate the rest of you guys for watching. Go freaking crush the rest of the week. If there's anything you need on my end, drop a comment down below or hit me up on Instagram. And I'll talk to you very soon.